Okay, so the first lesson we're looking at today is task 2, advantages and disadvantages. So the question is, many people believe that reducing the speed limit is the best option for road safety improvement. Do you think there are other measures that could be put in place? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of this? Okay, so the question is asking you to discuss whether reducing the speed limit is the most effective thing that the government could do to improve road safety. So there's different parts to this task. So what they want you to do is you definitely have to discuss the speed limit. They want you to come up with some other measures, and then they want you to do some kind of evaluation of the different ways of improving road safety. So you can compare the speed limit to another solution that you come up with, and you should come to some kind of evaluative conclusion. So about advantages and disadvantages. So is one solution better than another solution? What are the pros and cons of the speed limit versus other methods? Okay, so you can do some comparisons. Is one method more effective than other methods? Is one method going to be more expensive than other methods? So come to some kind of evaluation. So that's what you should be looking to do in this kind of essay. So let's have a look at what this candidate has written. So let's start with the introduction. One of the most conspicuous trends of today's world is a colossal surge in the number of vehicle accidents on the road, and it is often argued that regulating the highest speed should be opted to deal with this problem. Okay, so one of the most conspicuous trends in today's world is a colossal surge. It's colossal surge, nice vocabulary, I like that. Conspicuous trend, I like that word too, good vocabulary. In the number of vehicle accidents on the road, and it's often argued that regulating the high speed should be opted to deal with this problem. So really, make sure you use the word opted. So if you opt to do something, so you would say something like, I opted to study maths. It means kind of like you chose something. In this situation, opted doesn't really fit with this sentence, because I see that the person's trying to paraphrase chosen. But you can't really say there's something, the highest speed should be opted to deal with this problem. You could rephrase it to say that the government should opt for reducing the speed limit, or it's often argued that regulating the speed limit is the best option or the most effective option. But in this one, opted, I know that they're trying to show some high-level vocabulary, but in this sentence, opted doesn't really have the right feel. So I would rephrase this either as regulating the highest speed should be chosen, or should be selected to deal with this problem, or regulating the highest speed limit is the most effective option. Okay, either of those would be slightly better than opted. Opted has a slightly strange feel to it. One thing I really like in this sentence is the way that they've paraphrased. So people often think that paraphrasing is literally just switching one word for another. But what this kind of has done is, instead of they talk about for road safety improvement, what they've paraphrased is they've actually given an example as a paraphrase. So one of the most conspicuous trends in today's world is a colossal surge so they've got the number of vehicle accidents on the road. Okay, so what they've done here is they've used this as a paraphrase for road safety. Okay, so they could have said, if they wanted to paraphrase, they could have said something like, transportation security or something. Transportation. That would have been like a literal paraphrase, but what they've chosen to do instead is they've given an example of what they mean. Okay, so they're sort of going a sort of level above, just taking the main topic sentence and switching out some of the words as a paraphrase, but they've actually used an example as a paraphrase, which I really liked. So it shows a higher level of understanding and a higher level of vocabulary to be able to do that. So overall, the first sentence of their introduction, good grammar, good vocabulary, with just one minor sort of error. I still understand what they mean, but not the best word chosen. And a nice paraphrase. It introduces the topic. It lets me know what we're going to talk about. So we get to sentence 2. this essay will discuss the positive and negative aspects of such a measure and provide some other feasible solutions. I like the word feasible. Feasible solutions, again, good vocabulary. Now, what's missing from this sentence? I say it all the time. You've not given me your subtopics and you've not given me your opinion. Okay? You've not told me what your conclusion is going to be. So this sentence, the essay will discuss the positive and negative aspects and provide some other feasible solutions. What's this sentence telling me? I mean, I guess that you're giving me an idea of the structure. You're going to say positive things, you're going to say negative things, then you're going to give a solution. But you've not told me what your opinion is. You've not told me how you're going to evaluate it. So a much more effective sentence in your introduction would be something like, this essay will discuss the positive and negative effects of regulating the speed limit while evaluating other less expensive and more effective options. Or, while some people may argue that regulating the speed limit is the most effective way, this essay will argue that there are other government-led solutions which will be much more effective and cost-effective. So then you're telling me what you're going to talk about, you're giving me your subtopics, and you're giving me your opinion. So when I read this introduction, I don't know what the writer is thinking. I don't know exactly what their opinion is going to be. Okay, so that's the sort of weakness of this introduction. So if you're going for those higher level bands, you're trying to hit those band 6s and above, you really need to be showing me what your opinion is in your introduction. But overall, I thought a pretty reasonably strong introduction. But just my personal thing I hate the most, they didn't tell me what their opinion is. So let's go to the first paragraph. There are some ways to cope with this soaring concern. So again, soaring concern, I can see this candidate is really trying with their vocabulary. I can really feel that they've thought carefully about their vocabulary, and I appreciate it. Soaring concern, soaring, it's quite like a sort of literary nice word to use. It's sort of like poetic. It sounds like it's from a novel. So not really strictly appropriate, perhaps, for this situation. But overall, I think it's okay. I'm not going to mark them down for that. But it's kind of the thing you would read in a poem, maybe. His soaring hopes, or his heart soared on the wings of love, or something. That's what it makes me think about. But I'm not going to. So it's a little bit too much, this paraphrase. But I think, overall, I think it's a good effort, and I appreciate it. So the other issue with this first sentence, there are some ways to cope with this soaring concern. So then what this candidate is doing is this is the paragraph where they're discussing their alternate solutions. So this is where they're saying some people think that the speed limit should be changed, but here are some other things we should do. So, but this sentence doesn't make that clear. There are some ways to cope with this soaring concern. There are some alternate ways to cope with this soaring concern. So in the introduction, the only solution you've talked about is regulating the speed limit. So that's what you're sort of comparing against. So in this sentence, you need to set that up again. Okay, in the introduction, I know that we talked about the speed limit, but first, let me talk about what else we could do. So that's why we need the word alternate in here. So there are some alternate ways to cope with this soaring concern. First and foremost, I like that introduction, governments should apply stringent regulations with heavy punishment. Stringent regulations, a good word combination. Stringent often goes together with regulations or laws. It's a good word combination. And these are words that often are paired together. So it shows a very good high-level vocabulary. First and foremost, government should apply stringent regulations with heavy punishment. For example, by punishing severely the drunken driver, drunken drivers in general. By punishing severely the drunken drivers, people could be aroused caution. So could be aroused caution. This is sort of incorrect grammatical phrasing here. What the candidate's trying to say is that by severely punishing drunken drivers, people may be more cautious. So you could say people may be more cautious. You could also say a sort of a good specific vocabulary word here is deterred. People may be deterred from this action. Something like that, okay? So it would be a much better phrase. So deterred is something we talk a lot about, trying to stop people doing crime. So one thing people often say about we should have heavy punishment, we should have strict punishments for crimes as a deterrent, or the death penalty is a good deterrent to stop people committing crimes, or something like that. So that would be a good, nice, specific word to use in this situation. So moving on to, secondly, governments ought to construct more rest areas on the motorways. Rest areas on motorways, we're talking about in general, motorways. It may encourage people, comma, especially cargo truck drivers, comma, to take a rest when feeling drowsy. Okay, so here's what I think is missing from this paragraph. Okay, so what they've done is they've started the first sentence. Do you think there are other measures that could be put in place? Okay, so they've started by talking about the other measures that they could put in place. But what they're missing is the advantages and disadvantages. There's no evaluation. That's my question. Where is the evaluation of these solutions? Where's the comparison to reducing the speed limit? You know, where's the advantages or disadvantages? Something like that. That's what's missing. Why would some people think we should do this rather than changing the speed limit? So that's my first thing. There's no evaluation. This paragraph really is quite short, and they've given 2 examples, but they've not explained in enough detail. Okay? They need to expand and explain more. Okay? You can give an example from your personal experience. You could make something up. So you could say, if we're talking about the drunk driving, first and foremost, government should apply stringent regulations with heavy punishment. For example, by punishing severely drunk drivers, people may be more cautious. For example, a study by UCL found that when the punishment for drink driving was increased from 1 year in prison to 2 years in prison, the number of drunk drivers decreased by 50%. Or countries like Japan, which have extremely large fines for people caught drink driving, have on average 60% fewer accidents per year than countries like Australia, which have less strict fines. So by doing some explaining a bit more, expanding a little bit more on this example, you're getting in more detail, more vocabulary, more grammar, and you're showing that you can construct a more coherent argument. Okay, this as an example is too short, and it's also everything in this paragraph is missing evaluation and comparison. The vocabulary is quite good. The examples are relevant. They've produced 2 good solutions, but they're missing this evaluation and they're missing this comparison, which is going to affect their task achievement, I think. So then let's look at the next paragraph. So they go to, however, there are plenty of merits for the implementation of limiting speed. Okay, so I like this as a good topic sentence. It's a good, clear opening sentence that tells me what you're going to do. So we're going to talk about the positive results of changing the speed limit. To begin with, the low speed is likely to respond quickly to sudden accidents. Okay, so what we're missing here is the person. So to begin with, it should be something like, to begin with, driving at a lower speed means a driver is more likely to respond quickly to sudden accidents. Okay, so that's what they needed to add in. For instance, as a lot of school zones were designated and regulated the highest speed at 20 kilometers per hour to protect children crossing the crosswalk, accidents in those areas have been significantly reduced. Okay, so this is what I was talking about in the previous paragraph, giving a more detailed example to expand on your point. Okay, so now they've given a much more specific example. This should be phrased slightly differently. A lot of school zones were designated, regulated, regulated for the highest speed to be 20 kilometers per hour. Accidents are having significantly reduced. Okay. In addition, people can develop patience by driving at lower speeds. To illustrate, as people can drive with a relaxed mind and show good driving manners, discords on the road will be abated. Discord. So discord, again, this candidate's trying to paraphrase like arguments or conflicts. The thing we call it when you get angry on the road, the phrase in English is road rage. Oh, I got road rage, or I had such bad road rage yesterday, or I hate commuting in the morning, I get such bad road rage. So you could use that. So and show good driving manners, road rage will be abated. So you could say that. Rather than discords, it probably would be better to phrase as conflicts, arguments, disagreements. You could sort of say, maybe just rage. You say rage on the road will be abated. But road rage is how we would normally phrase it. And then also the thing is, I think will is a little bit too strong here. So one sort of mark of high-level language is being able to use cautious language when you're showing cause and effect. So we don't know that if we lower the speed limit, people will relax more. Maybe when you lower the speed limit, people will just get more angry. So it would be better to say something like, cautious might be abated, could be abated, maybe abated, something like that. So this is better than the previous paragraph. They've explained a little bit more, but still, for example, especially for this last one, you're missing his specific example. Okay, so when writing about road rage, here I would want to see some kind of example of, and it's something you can just, make up, for instance, in Seoul, the National University of Seoul found that in city zones with lower speed limits, there were fewer instances of road rage than in areas of the city with higher speed limits. So you're able to then provide a more specific example. Then you would follow that with, therefore, it's possible that lowering the speed limit will help reduce traffic accidents and improve road safety. Okay? So there's a method that we learned for writing paragraphs in the UK. Call it PPP, peel. Okay, so you give your point. Okay, so the point here is that lowering the speed limit, your point is this. In addition, people can develop patience by driving at lower speeds. Okay, then you give your example. Okay, so this is where they say, he tried to explain that what people drive at lower speed, but he's missing his specific example. Okay, so you're saying that people will be more relaxed, they'll become more relaxed, and there'll be fewer instances of road rage. You need to give your specific example. So this is where you will be talking about, like in different areas of Seoul, there are fewer instances of road rage in places with lower speed limits. That's when you explain it more. So that's when you go, therefore, we can see driving at a slower speed helps people remain calm. Okay? Then you link it back to the question. So then you say, therefore, we can see there are many benefits to reducing the speed limit, or reducing the speed limit can have an effect on traffic safety. Okay? So that's how we structure a paragraph in UK schools. That's the method they always teach us. So when you're trying to write, if you're following this kind of method, you're going to make sure that you fully expand and explain your points. Because actually for task achievement on the mark band scheme for IELTS, it talks about being able to explain and expand on your examples, okay? So if you're able to be sort of hitting these 4 areas of a paragraph, that's going to help you make sure that you're expanding all of your points and all of your examples. Writing 2 sentences like this candidate has done for one of their points isn't enough. That's not expanded enough. It's a relevant point. It's well written. I understand it. It's logical. It's not expanded enough. So that's what affects your task achievement score. Okay, then we're going to paragraph 3 where they compare to the disadvantages of the speed limit. So on the other hand, there could also be a number of negative effects. First of all, reducing the speed limit may lead to increased traffic hours and even traffic congestion. To be specific, I like this traffic congestion, nice specific vocabulary. To be specific, commuters may need to set off for their work at the crack of dawn, which is not only inefficient but also counterproductive. Crack of dawn. So this is one of the examples we've got of a less common lexical item, less common vocabulary being used. It sounds quite natural, native speakers. I'm like, okay, good. Also, counterproductive is a very good word. High-level vocabulary, used correctly, excellent. A further drawback is that when an emergency like an accident or crime occurs, they may miss the golden hour that is the moment where life or death is determined. Now, when I first read this sentence, I wasn't really sure what it meant. When an emergency, they. So I think it's like, who is they? I don't know who they was. I should be able to figure it out from going to the previous sentence. Are they talking about maybe commuters? Commuters may miss the golden hour that is the moment where life or death is determined. So if there's an accident, if you drive too slowly, you might die. It doesn't really make sense to me because I'm like, well, if you're a commuter and you get into a traffic accident, surely if it's an emergency, you would call an ambulance. And ambulances aren't limited by the speed limit. Ambulances can go as fast as they want. Or something like that. So I was just, the golden hour was my life. This was very confusing to me. And I think the main thing was I wasn't sure who they was in this situation because commuters didn't make sense to me. And neither does the police or the ambulance. Because if you're injured or in an accident, you can't drive because you're injured. And if you call the ambulance doesn't follow the speed limit because it's an ambulance. So I don't know. So this sentence confused me a little bit. I can see that this candidate has a very good vocabulary and they use it well. They're doing the disadvantages of limiting the speed limit, which I can see, which is fine. But what I really want them to be doing is to be coming to some kind of conclusion. Okay, there are no conclusions drawn in this paragraph. You know, what are you going to say? Are the negative effects more severe than the advantages that you just talked about? It's a very basic tactic to say, like, on the one hand, some people think A. On the other hand, some people think B. In conclusion, there are many opinions. It's very bland. It's very easy. What you want to be doing to get a better structured, more well thought out essay is that you should know when you're writing, do you think that the negative effects are more severe than the positive effects? Or do you think that they could be balanced in some way by some action? So let's have a look and see if they've come to some conclusion. Oh, the first thing, 2 sentences is not long enough for your conclusion. That's my first thought. Too short. Too short. It's possible that a lot of candidates do this because they start running out of time and they just quickly write two sentences at the end. Oh, it's too short. In conclusion, there are definite beneficial effects of such a measure as well as detrimental ones. However, some other solutions can be carried out to address the road safety problem. Okay, so what they've done here is they've not actually summarized what they talked about. There's no summary here. They've just kind of repeated 2 sentences, but again, there's no opinion. Where's your opinion? You know, what was the point of me writing this essay, reading this essay? You know, what you need to tell me what you think. So basically, they've come for the 50-50. You know, some things are good, some things are bad. Okay, well, you need to tell me something. One thing you could say, something like, there are definite benefits as well as some drawbacks. If the government can make sure there is no traffic congestion, then it could be beneficial to lower the speed limit. Or if the government can improve road infrastructure in order to avoid traffic congestion, then lowering the speed limit can be seen as the best solution. Okay? So now you've balanced it. You've said, yes, there are advantages and disadvantages, but you have then come to an opinion. You've said, okay, well, you know, if we can do this, then the solution is okay. That's also much better, more sophisticated grammar because you're using this hypothetical sentence. Okay? That's what I would recommend to this candidate. If they really have no opinion, they need to lie and make one up. And then they said, however, some other solutions can be carried out to address the road safety problem. But again, where's your there's no evaluation, there's no judgment of these solutions. Are they better than lowering the speed limit? We don't know because this candidate's not told us. You know, are they more effective, less effective? So you could also come up with something like, however, as previously discussed, other solutions such as more rest stops, and what was the other solution they proposed? Increased rest stops and more heavy punishment for drivers, for drink driving can be carried out. Or, you know, so maybe one conclusion you could say was that maybe this lowering the speed limit won't stop drunk drivers, because drunk drivers are drunk and they don't care about the speed limit. So the best solution is to combine lowering the speed limit with more heavy punishment for drink drivers. And then combined together, that's going to address road safety in a more effective way. Okay, so there are lots of different ways that you can sort of come to an opinion or come to a conclusion in an essay like this. I know it doesn't necessarily say in the question, you know, and give your opinion. But when it asks you to discuss the advantages and disadvantages, a low level sort of band 5 or lower answer is going to say the advantages of this, the disadvantages of this. There you go. But to get those higher level answers, you need to come to some sort of evaluative conclusion. Okay, and that's what this candidate is really missing here, which is a shame because there's a lot of very positive things about this essay. So, overall, for giving a score, so overall the task achievement was at a 6.0 for this essay. They did address the parts of the question. They gave advantages, they gave disadvantages, they gave other solutions. But what they were really missing to sort of, this essay really had the potential to go a lot higher because the vocabulary and grammar was so good. So what they really needed to do is they needed to expand and explain their ideas more, and they needed to give me an opinion and come to some kind of conclusion, okay? Then that would really have pushed them up 6.57 for task achievement, you know? So it's quite disappointing that the conclusion didn't have the kind of judgment that I was looking for, okay? Coherence and cohesion. I gave a 6.5. They had good connectives. They paragraphed well. I thought that was good. But what I really want to see from this candidate is to vary their structure. So when we go back and we look at this, what this candidate writes, they use a lot of connectives, but they're very similar, okay? So if we look at the sentence structures, okay, so the sentence one, however, comma, there are plenty of merits for the inflation of limiting speed. To begin with, comma, the lower speed means the driver is likely to respond to an arrow. For instance, comma, as a lot of school zones were designated as 20 kilometers per crossing road. In addition, comma, people can develop to illustrate, comma, as people can drive, okay? So if we look down here, let me try and change my color. So we've got to illustrate, in addition, for instance, to begin with, however, okay? So one of the things they talk about in the mark scheme is that transitions are good, but they feel quite robotic and quite mechanical, okay? And so while this candidate has used a really good variety of words, used correctly, it feels quite robotic when I'm reading it. So that's what's holding you back from getting those much higher scores, okay? Paragraph 2, on the other hand, comma, first of all, comma, to be specific, comma. Okay, so it's using that same. What they've done here, a further drawback is that, okay, that's a much better, more natural transition, okay? So what I would suggest to this candidate to practice is to practice varying how they transition between sentences. Transitioning is not just, for instance, moreover, furthermore, however, on the other hand. Okay, those are all relevant words, but there are many, many more different ways to transition between your sentences. So that's what I would recommend to this candidate. Vocabulary, I thought 6.5, maybe a little bit, a little bit more. Like their vocabulary really was excellent. So 6.5 maybe a 7, depending, but they had a couple of, small areas where it wasn't always used correctly. But the vocabulary was very good. Potentially, I could be persuaded to put that up to a 7. Grammar, again, 6.5, good mix between sort of simple, they used a couple more complex sentences. They did have one area, like that sentence I pointed out, where I didn't really know what they were talking about. And again, the other thing would be about varying the sentence structure, okay? So that thing about cohesion, where it reads quite robotically, the cohesive device, comma, cohesive device, comma, that also is going to affect your grammar because then you're not showing me a full range of sentence structures. So that would be my recommendation for this candidate. But overall, it's 6.5. I think there's a lot of potential for this candidate. Their vocabulary really was quite impressive. And they were able to logically construct an argument. But I feel like they've got a lot more potential to push higher up into a band 7 if they can improve on some of these areas.